Hey guys, this is the companion video for Flute Etude 1 for this year's Region 9 Junior High Band Audition. So my other video on this etude is the performance video, and that'll give you a good idea of how the music sounds. And then you can also use that as a practice buddy to play along with me and make sure your notes, rhythm, etc. are all lining up with me while I'm playing along with the metronome. And then here's your first little practice hack with that. You can change your playback speed in the settings on the video, and then you can get a total of 4 tempos to play along with. So in the comments, I have timestamps so you can jump straight to the performance at 100 and straight to the performance at 120. And so if you've got your playback on 0.75%, it will sound as eighth note equals 75 and eighth note equals 90. I'm just going to write that in there. It'll sound like 75 and 90 if you're at 75% playback speed, and then full speed at 100 and 120. So that is a great way to kind of get your tempo, your performance tempo up incrementally and make sure everything's still lining up. All right, so in this video, we're going to talk about working in the 6/8 time signature. We'll talk a little more about tempo, and then I'm going to give you some practice strategies for dynamics and breathing in here. So let's start first with 6/8, which is probably new for a lot of us. First thing I want to do is talk about something that is familiar to us, which is 4/4. So the two different parts of a time signature, the top number tells us how many beats in each measure. And that's the part of time signature we normally know and feel confident with. It's the bottom number where we're like, I don't really know what that means. And my students will frequently say, well, does it mean 4 notes in the measure? No, it does not. What it is telling us is what note equals 1 beat. So if there's a 4 in the bottom, it's telling us a quarter note equals 1 beat. And that sounds like normal, right? So now in 6/8, the 6 tells us we have 6 beats in each measure. And then the 8 is telling us that an eighth note equals 1 beat. So that's really different. Okay, so down here, we're going to make a little chart. We have 5 different note values in here, and this is going to be like a little answer key to help you figure out your rhythm. So we've got 16th notes, eighth notes, dotted eighth notes, quarter notes, and dotted quarter notes. All right, so we already said eighth note equals 1 beat, so we can fill that one in. And we know there's 2 eighth notes in a quarter note, so that means quarter notes here are equal to 2 beats. And then we've got these dotted values. So the best way to figure out a dotted value is pretend the dot's not even there. So what if it was just an eighth note? Well, eighth note equals 1 beat. And then here's the formula for the dot. The dot is worth half of what the attached note value is. So half of 1 is a half, and that means our dotted eighth note is 1.5 beats. And so that would be counted 1, and that's the full beat. And then 2 is the extra half beat. It's like we're stealing the first half of the next beat. So that's the extra half. So 1 and 2 is how you're going to count that. And sometimes in this etude, it starts on 1 and 2, like right here. But then we've got the duplicate rhythm here. So it's going to start actually on beat 4 there. Okay, and then let's figure this out for dotted quarter note. So by itself, the quarter note is 2 beats. Half of 2 is 1, so 2 plus 1 equals 3 beats for the dotted quarter note here. Now we've got to do a little bit of division because we've got 16th notes. So just like in 4/4, there are 2 16th notes in each eighth note, which means together they are worth 1 beat. And then each individually is worth a half beat. So they're going to be counted like eighth notes would in 4/4. You're going to count them one and, or like here, 4 and, 5 and, 6 and, like that. All right, so this gives you everything you need to know to figure out your rhythm in here. One other thing I want to talk about, just relating to the beats and how you do the counting. So we're used to counting up to 4 beats in the measure, but sometimes it can get a little awkward to be thinking about 5s and 6s and 5 ands and 6 ands. So you can always like divide the measure in half and think in 2 groups of 3. So it's 1, 2, 3, 1, hold, 2, and 3, like that. And so you still get all 6 beats, but you have just more comfortable wording. Or you can think in 6. All right, so now that we know what 6/8 is all about, let's talk a little more about tempo, because we've got this word up here, allegretto. Change color, that looks good. So if you are familiar with musical terms, you might know the word allegro, which means fast. So we've got this little modifier on the end. The etto means not too much. So this is not too fast. But that doesn't mean slow, because remember, our root word is allegro, which means faster. So it's just not too fast, but kind of on the fast side. But it's also giving you instructions here. Make sure we're in 6 the whole time. So even when we're at 120, we want to make sure we're feeling all 6 beats of each measure, and that will help us not get too fast. This is a pretty big range between 100 and 120, but it is easy to get this up over 120, so you want to make sure you're keeping that allegretto feel to it. Okay, so if you haven't written this all down, you can take a quick screenshot of the page, and then you can add that to your page later, but I'm going to erase this so that we can talk about dynamics. All right, so change colors here. We have 3 printed dynamics in here: piano, mezzo forte, and forte. And I left a little spot here because we all know it doesn't go straight from piano to mezzo forte. What do we have in the middle? Mezzo piano. So even though it's not printed up here, we definitely do have to play it mezzo piano because we've got like a crescendo here. So we're starting piano and then we're going to go through mezzo piano and get to more mezzo forte. So as you're learning dynamics in here, you really want to make sure you have 4 good like checkpoints here, like 4 different levels of your volume. Okay, so one thing that I like to do when I'm learning new dynamics or when I'm encouraging my students to start in on dynamics is to play all the alike dynamic levels, like all the alike piano parts together. So you'd play, just these 3 notes, and then you jump over here and keep that same, super quiet volume and play up through there, and then, jump to the next one. So that's a good way to make sure that you're hearing those parts of the etude at that really quiet level. And then you can jump and you can do the same thing for all the printed mezzo fortes and then all the fortes. And so especially here, I think this is really important. You want to make sure your mezzo forte is much closer to forte than it is to the piano. Normally we kind of think of mezzo forte and forte as both loud, but since we do have both of them in here, you want to make sure you have a difference between them when you're playing that. Okay, and then let's clear that, and we're going to talk a little bit about breathing. Let's use green. All right, so whoever edited this did a great job of letting us know a whole bunch of places to breathe. And these are kind of tucked in here. They look like floating commas. But yeah, look at that. All these really good places to breathe. And then, of course, you can always breathe on a rest. So that's a good place too. But what this is doing, these printed breath marks, is it's dividing the music into phrases, which is like a sentence. So you can think of it like if you're writing a paragraph, your paragraph consists of multiple sentences. And so this is like a musical paragraph, and it consists of all these multiple sentences. So when you're speaking, normally we wait until the end of a sentence to take a breath. You wouldn't take an awkward breath in the middle of a sentence like that. That just sounds funny. So same thing here. You just want to play to the end of a musical idea, then you take your breath, and then you start the next musical idea. So if you're playing along at 100, you might need more breaths just because the tempo is slower. So where are some other good places to breathe in here? Well, general rules for breathing are, breathe on a rest, because that's like free time. Nothing else is going on. Breathe where it's marked, and then breathe after long notes, because you can steal a little bit of time away from it to take the breath. So let's see. This is a really long phrase. If we breathe here, and then we've got 1, 2, 3, basically 4 measures, 4 long measures, where like up here we had 2 measures and 2 measures. So if you need a breath in here, this is a great place to breathe, because it's after a longer note and it kind of divides it in half. So maybe you notice this and you're practicing between 1 and 8. That's our first theme, and it comes back right here from 17 to the end. The only difference is this phrase ends with 1 beat on the F, and this phrase ends with 2 beats on the F. But since we marked this breath in here, we can safely mark it down here too. And then there might be a couple other places where you've got a little bit longer of a phrase, or you're playing loud and you feel like you might need to add an extra breath in there. So just try and make it after a longer note. Unfortunately, like a lot of these longer notes are underneath a slur, which makes it tricky. But you can also breathe after an 8th note and kind of sneak it in. And, if you do it quietly, then people might not notice so much. All right, so we've got a pickup note here to start off the whole thing. Then we breathe. We've got another pickup note here to start off the next phrase. There's 2 pickup notes here, so that's definitely a theme in here. And you want to keep any extra breaths also feeling that pickup feeling there. All right, so that's about it for today. I feel like probably the most important things I can impress upon you in this is make sure you're really subdividing your rhythm, counting out the dotted notes and keeping the 6 beats. And then remember, this is the lyrical etude, which means singing. So you want to make sure you've got beautiful tone, vibrato if you know how to do that, and make sure you are using all sorts of like creative musicality in your phrases. So the judging panel is always cheering you on when we're sitting on the other side of that black drape. If you're nervous, just try and remember we're all cheering you on from the other side. And we want you to do well. Like, we can't wait to hear you play. So good luck in your preparation. If you have any other questions that I didn't address, drop me a comment and I'll be sure to respond. Good luck.